This is what we're going to build: an alert notification box with a custom message and a list of GitHub repo checks. We'll be using NextJS, Tailwind, and Flagsmith to control the notification message content and what features are publicly available in our app. We can change these without redeploying using the open source project Flagsmith. Have you ever needed to disable features in your app for your users? I know I have. Have you ever wanted to show a message to all of your users on the homepage, or even a subset or group of users? I know I have. But I bet you have done it the way I used to do it. Either hard code your feature flags and app messages, or have them in a config or environment variable. But this means we still need to redeploy every time you want to add a message, change it, or remove it. This makes it higher risk and more time consuming. Maybe some of you have built and tested an admin panel to manage these feature flags. This takes even more time when you could be working on your product. As developers, we don't build everything ourselves. For example, for JavaScript developers, every time we use npm, we are using third-party libraries, frameworks to help us build our product. Plus, we use pre-built third-party tools all the time like VS Code, Git, and GitHub, just to name a few. So why don't we do the same with feature flags? In this video, I will show you how the open source project Flagsmith can solve all these points I mentioned and more. No surprise, it is open source. This is me. We're going to use NextJS, Tailwind with Flagsmith and GitHub's API to create a repo best practice checklist, which will look like this. Flagsmith will allow us to easily have feature flags in our project. I know what you are thinking. Why would we want feature flags in our project? The most talked about reason is for A/B testing, but it can also be used to decouple releases from deployments. Limiting features to certain people or groups of people, for example maintainers, we can merge to production much quicker and with lower risk. Or other cool features like in-app notifications. Plus, we can even do testing in production if we need for specific users like our maintainers. I know you are keen to get coding along with me, so let's go. As I mentioned, we are using NextJS, but you can use any tools you prefer, as Flagsmith has many SDKs, as you can see on my screen. We're going to build an app that checks the open sourceness, yes, I just invented that word, of a repo. So let's get started. First, we're going to create a new NextJS project using the app router. We'll use our favorite command, npx create next app, and we'll use the latest version, and we'll call the project Flagsmith video recording. Follow the CLI instructions, and we'll be using JavaScript for this project. We'll be using ESLint, and we'll be using Tailwind, and we'll use the source directory, and yes, we'll use the app router, but we won't customize the import aliases just yet. Now the project is finished setting up, we should navigate into the directory, Flagsmith video recording, and we should run npm run dev to check the project is up and running and make sure all is working before we make any changes. And then it'll be available on localhost 3000. Sign up and create a new project on Flagsmith. It's completely free to use. Start by going to the Flagsmith homepage and click sign in. Here you can sign in with GitHub, Google, single sign-on. I've already got an account, so I will log in. Here we'll see our dashboard. I've got an organization, EddieHub, and we can create a new project. We can call this Health Check Video. Click Create Project. The first feature flag I would like to create is a welcome message that is managed by Flagsmith. I want to be able to change this welcome message often without redeploying my app. Let's click Create Feature. The feature flag ID is the unique name of the feature. It should be descriptive but short, as you'll be referencing this in your code. Don't worry, you can give more information in the description field below. Please note, the flag ID cannot be changed once it's created. I will call this welcome_message. We can enable this feature flag by default. This is called the flag state. Also, there is an option to set a value if you want to, where you can use text, JSON, XML, YAML, or TOML. This is called the feature flag value. We'll use text for now, but later on we will use JSON. So let me add hello world to the value field. If you just want a Boolean flag, you can in your code ignore the flag value and check for the flag state. Why would you want to do this? To show or hide a feature in your application's user interface. The Boolean flag will be enough for this. We can even use feature flags to configure our environment variables in our application. For example, setting the database URL for your API using the string flag value, or setting the Google Analytics API key in your front end. Let's move on to tags. These are a great way to organize our features. I'm going to add the tag notification, as this is how I'd like to group this feature flag. And you can also add a color. I will add it as red. And then click Save Tag. Other tags I think I would use are maintainer or premium. I mentioned earlier that you should keep the title concise and expand on what the feature flag is about by adding a description, which I highly recommend. For our welcome message feature flag description, I will add welcome all users. We can also add a GitHub issue link in the description, as every feature should have an issue and pull request, so we can manage the feature with our team. So let me go create one. So here I'm creating an issue on my project repo, and we can give it a title, welcome message with feature flag. And I highly recommend adding a description and what you want to do, but for now, I just want to get the issue link so I can add it to the description on Flagsmith. And now you can see I've added the issue to our description. In certain situations where you have private data, you can actually restrict your flags to server-side only. This can be achieved with the toggle server-side only. Remember, all values can be changed after you've created the feature flag. The only item that can't be changed is the feature flag ID. Now I can click Create Feature and we'll see a list of all our feature flags on the Flagsmith dashboard. And currently we only have one, but we'll be adding more shortly. Also note that features are created in all environments within a project, but their values and states are modified independently between environments. Let me show you. Here we automatically kind of get sent to the development environment, and we've got the welcome message feature flag, but we've got production underneath as well. And if we go to features and production, we've got the same welcome message feature flag added there as well. And we can manage the values and the state of these feature flags independently. On the feature flag list, you can see our welcome message feature flag with the tag notification that we just created. But below that, we'll see the instructions on how to add Flagsmith to our project. So we install the SDK, you can select your language. In our case, we're using JavaScript, initializing your project, and providing feature flag defaults and offline support. There's lots you can read there, but let me take you through it. So now we want to run the npm install command. So let's stop our project and we will run npm install Flagsmith, save. Now we can move on to step 2, where we'll need to import and initialize Flagsmith using our environment ID, which is already provided to us in the coding example. In step 2, you can see this is our environment ID for us. So you make sure you use your own environment ID. Open your favorite IDE. I will use VS Code, and I can open it in the terminal by using code and then dot. We'll open this project up here. What I like to do with my Next.js projects is remove all the information we actually don't need. So if I open source, we can open the layout, and we're going to come back to this. So we'll leave this open for the moment. This is where we're going to start adding the Flagsmith code. But for now, let me open pages and actually remove everything that's in pages for now. I do want to put some text on this page to make sure it still works. I do want to remove the extra items in the global CSS as well. Get a nice clean project. Before we go any further, let's run our project and make sure it does show the text we just added to the project, and make sure we haven't broken it after removing all that code. So localhost 3000, refresh, and it should say health check. And it says health check on the screen, so we know we've got more of a vanilla project. So now let's get back to adding Flagsmith. And as I mentioned, we need the layout file first. Here we're going to import Flagsmith, and we're going to import create Flagsmith instance. from Flagsmith isomorphic. The next thing we want to do is in our component, we want to create a constant Flagsmith, and you can see Copilot's jumping ahead with us, and it's going to be create Flagsmith instance. And then below that, we'll want to do an await Flagsmith initialize, so init, and we're going to pass in some configuration. And here we will want to pass in the configuration of environment ID for now. There'll be some more later on. And we can put it directly in the code here. We can put it in an M file. There's various things that we can do. I like to put my things in an M file so they're all in one place. So let's do that. So we'll say process env, and I will call it next public. So make sure it's publicly available in Next.js. And then we'll say flagsmith underscore environment ID. And you can see the await is underlined. So don't forget to add an async to your layout, and that is possible because it is running server side. So if I hit save, it will automatically format it for me, and we must go create the M file, and we can do that in the root of the project. I'll say .env, and we can go back to the Flagsmith dashboard and actually get this env ID variable. I'll paste it in, and on the left side of the equals, we need to make sure we have the exact naming of the next underscore public Flagsmith environment ID. So I like to copy and paste that to make sure I don't make any typos. And now we've saved that. We're almost there. So next we just want to have a constant of the server state, and that's going to be flagsmith.getState. Now we've got the server state. What I like to do is put a console log to make sure we are getting the data from the third-party service, from Flagsmith in this case. So let's do a console log, and Copilot has completed it for us. Be a console log server state as a string, and then a server state as the variable. Let's hit save, and let's go back and refresh our page, and let's have a look and to see if the data is coming through. As you can see in our terminal, we do have the server state. This is the string, and this is the object coming back from Flagsmith. We do have our welcome message is enabled to true, and the value is hello world. And let's just prove that this data is actually changing and connected with Flagsmith. So I'm going to go back to Flagsmith. I'm going to go to my welcome message, and I'm going to change the value from hello world to hello friends. And let's just hit update. We can go back to our app. If we hit refresh again, and then if we go back to our terminal, we should also see now it's changed from hello world, as you can see at the top, to hello friends. So the communication is working really well. Now we have our app communicating with Flagsmith really well. We want to add the Flagsmith provider so that we have the state within our application. So if we go back to VS Code and the layout file, this can be done directly in the layout file or in a separate provider file to abstract this away. I will create a separate provider file as I prefer to keep the layout as clean as possible. So in the root of the app directory, I'm going to create a providers file, .js. From the Flagsmith documentation, the file will look something like this. We want it to be a client, and we're going to import Flagsmith provider from Flagsmith React. And then we also want to import create Flagsmith instance from Flagsmith. Copilot didn't quite get it right on this. We want isomorphic at the end. And then we also want to import use ref from React. If I hit save, it'll automatically format that for us. I don't have to do it myself. And then we need the component itself, which is export default function. Copilot is almost right, but it's going to also be providers, and we want to pass in the server state as well as the children. I think Copilot's got the next bit right. We've got constant Flagsmith, And then we're using ref of the Flagsmith instance. So create Flagsmith instance as a function. And then we want to return the Flagsmith provider. And we need to pass in a couple of properties. So props, in this case, we want to pass in Flagsmith, and that's going to be equal to Flagsmith current. So Copilot wrote it as instance. So it's kind of half right. And then we also want to pass in server state as well. So we can say server state equals server state. If I hit save, that will get formatted a lot nicer to read. If I remove the sidebar, you can see it reads a lot better as well, but we need a sidebar for our files. So the Flagsmith provider wraps the children, and it's returned as well from the component. Next, we want to add the provider to the layout file. I'm going to leave the console log in the layout just for fun, but we need to add the provider. So what we need to do is import our providers from providers in the same directory. Got a relative path there. And then we can wrap the body with the provider component and pass in the state. Copilot is trying to help us out. It's saying server state, which is correct, but then it's automatically closing the provider up here, which we don't need. So I'm going to just cut that out, remove children, and underneath the body, add in the closing provider. And that's what it should look like. Next, let's do something more visual. We want to display the welcome message that we created in Flagsmith to be in our app. So let's create a notification component, and we can create a new components directory because we don't have one already. Components, and in here we can write alert, if that's what we're going to call our component. It's going to be a client one, so we will say use client, and we can say export default function alert. We're not going to pass in any props, so I'll delete children from what Copilot added. And we can just write a message, make sure it all works. Just say hello world. So I'm hard coding that for now, but let's import it and make sure it does work on our page. So now if we go back to our page, we want to call the alert above where it says health check. So I'm going to add a few line breaks here, and then we can call our alert component. You can see it's automatically auto-completing at /component/alert. So let's add that in. There's no props, nothing like that. So now if I go back to the browser and refresh, we see hello world, which I hard coded. This is not coming from Flagsmith just yet. And then health check is what we've got in the page as well. I can wrap that in a H1. We are going to make this look a lot prettier in a moment. Okay, so now we can carry on working in the alert component, adding Flagsmith, adding some design, and making it look a lot better. So what I think we should do next is let's add a bit of design in there. So if we import some icons, we could use an exclamation mark, and that's correct. And let's just add this dependency as well. Go back to the console. Stop the app, do npm install icon set, and let's run the app again. Okay, we also want to import from Flagsmith use flags, and it'll be from Flagsmith React. We've already got the export component, but in here now we want to start bringing in Flagsmith. So what we can do is we can say const welcome message. That's what we had in Flagsmith as our feature flag. And we can say use flag. Thank you, Copilot. But we also want to pass in the flags we want to bring back. We don't want to bring back everything. So we will bring back welcome message from Flagsmith. And what we can do is a check. If the flag is not enabled, don't display any notification or alert at the top of the page. So we can say if there isn't a welcome message that is enabled, then let's return null. Okay, and if there is, we can actually return the value. So we could say welcome message dot value. Here you can see if the welcome message is not enabled, it will return null. The component won't be displayed. And if it's enabled, it will come down to here and we will display a value. So let me save that. Let's go back to our app and refresh. and we should see hello friends. We do, because that's what is in Flagsmith. So what we can do to prove that to you, we can go back to Flagsmith. We could change this message. We could say hello all my friends. And if I hit update and go back to the app and refresh, you can see it updates to hello all my friends. And if I disable it and hit update, it should go completely. And it's gone completely. So that is working. That's how you get a feature flag working, enable, disable to appear and disappear, but also with a value as well. But I said I will make this look pretty. So let me just add a little bit of styling here as well, because we have got the icon at the top, but we haven't used it yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to re-enable that. So therefore, when I do add styling, we can actually see it on the page. So now I've written some Tailwind classes, and to style this up, I've still got welcome message value here and still got the check, is it enabled or not? And we have enabled it in Flagsmith. I go back to the browser and refresh. You can see now it looks a lot better. It says attention, which is the hard-coded part in the alert. Hello, all my friends. And here we've got a really nice alert or notification, which is powered by feature flags in Flagsmith, if it's enabled or disabled, and the value of that content. So without redeploying, we can keep changing this. So if one day I wake up and I think, right, hello, all my friends, I might want to say, hello, open source community. I don't have to redeploy, I don't have to change any code. I can just change this directly in Flagsmith. And you can see now it changes it for everybody. Building on what we've just done, we can go even further by identifying users and showing those groups of users a different message. For example, maintainers or premium users. As we don't have authentication yet in this app or project, I've created so many videos on this already. To save time in this video, I will hard code a user into the layout and pass it to Flagsmith. We can use this with the identify function on the Flagsmith object. Let me show you. So just before get state, we will want to await for Flagsmith and we'll want to identify. And in the first parameter in identify will be the user ID. In this case, we can just hard code it from 1, 2, 3, but you can get that from your authentication system. And the second parameter is a trait, something that we'll use as a condition in Flagsmith shortly. So in this case, I'm going to use the email, and we do that as a second parameter as an object. So I will just create a fake email, so no one email me on this, eddie@eddiehub.org. And if I hit save, and I go back to the browser and refresh, there's actually no change because we haven't told Flagsmith to do anything different. Yes, it knows who our user is, but we haven't got anything different happening. What we can do is override the feature flag with specific information about the identified user. So we can click on the feature flag we want to do an override for, in this case, welcome message. And then we can go to segment overrides and we can click create feature specific segment. Give the segment of users a unique name. In this case, we can call them maintainers. Then we need to add an and condition. In this case, with trait that we coded in our app was email. And there are various conditions you can use: does not match, exactly match, split, and we could split on the @ and do some clever things. But just to keep it simple for now, I'm going to choose contains. And there's regex and all those other great things that we can do. So I want to say, does it contain eddiehub.org? So we're just checking if the domain is in the email address. And you can add an or an and condition, but in this case, I'm just going to hit create. And I'm going to enable the segment override, and then I don't forget to hit save at the bottom. So the value will be taken from the value of the feature flag, but we want to change that. So we can say hello maintainers. And I can click update again, and it's now saved. But if you look at the value, it still says hello open source community, and the segment override is hello maintainers. So let's go back to our app and refresh it, and it says hello maintainers. But let me change that to prove to you that it is not overriding it for everyone. So what I can do is I could remove this identifying line that we use with Flagsmith, or I could change the email domain as well. So in this case, I'll just put test as the email domain. And if I hit save and I go refresh the page, you'll see now it says hello open source community. And if I remove the line completely or comment it out in this case and refresh it, it still says hello open source community because it doesn't match the overriding segment. And just to prove it to you one last time, I'm going to undo those, go back to my email, just hit save and refresh, and it'll say hello maintainers. And this will work for anything in front of eddiehub.org. So if I change it to Sarah and hit save and refresh, it will still say hello maintainers because the domain is being matched. I know you want more examples, so let's do it. Let's create a list of checks that we can do for a repo, for example, URL, description, and topics. And we can do this against GitHub's API. Here's something I prepared earlier. So I've created a new component. It's going to be a client component, and I'm doing some imports that we're going to be using with Tailwind as well. And I did write the fetch to go to GitHub's API, but I realized as I was continually refreshing the page, it was continuously getting the API data from GitHub. So I've actually copied and pasted the content into a temporary constant called repo. So I'm just going to minimize that. But in here, you'll see has the full name, has lots of great information about the project. So we are going to be using the description, the homepage, which is the URL, and we will be using topics as well that you can see here. But I'm going to minimize that to give us some more real estate on the screen. Here I've written a function called checks, and it's going to return an array, and what it's going to do is for each check that we want to do. So for example, in this case, description, we've given it an ID of description, and remember this for later because this is what we'll use in Flagsmith to identify if this check is part of the free package or not. I've given it an icon, name description, and I've given the description a description, a bit meta there. And here's the check. If it has a description, then no action is required. Otherwise, if it doesn't have a description, then the action that will present to the user is add a description. And then we'll give it a priority. But in this case, it's not low, medium, or high. It's low or high. It either exists or it doesn't. Same with URL, very, very similar. And with topics, we've got a few more checks and conditions. So we do have low, medium, and high. Just to give you an example, in the action, if there are no topics, so topic length is 0, then we're going to return the action of add topics. If it's less than 3, we're going to return add a few more topics. And if it's greater than 20, we're going to say consider removing some topics. And if it doesn't fall into any of those conditions, we're going to say no action is required. And then with the priority, if it's 0, we're going to say it needs to be high. If it's less than 3, we're going to say medium. And if it's greater than 20, we're also going to say it's a medium. Otherwise, it returns a low. So that's our checks. And then in our actual component, we have a list and we're going to map over those checks. I want to show you that working, and then we're going to control what features we display from Flagsmith, and we will add the Flagsmith code to this component as well. And it only requires a few lines, as you'll see shortly. So let's go to the browser, and I've refreshed the browser, and you can see what we've got from before, like hello maintainers. We've got the title health check, but this is what we've added, this list of checks. So description, no action required, it's low. URL, no action required, it's low. And topics, no action required, it's low. And we can change that to prove to you that it's working. We could either change the condition or we could manipulate the data. I think changing the condition is probably the easier way. So let's go. So this is the last one, topics. Just to show to you about the priority, we've made it 20. I mean, I could create a variable and we could then reuse that, but for now I'll just change the 20s. So for example, if it is greater than 4, it's going to say consider removing some topics, and it's going to show it as a medium. So, and we have more than 4 on Biodrop, so this should be fine. So I've hit save, and if we refresh, you can see consider removing topics, it says medium. It's still green. We probably want to change that to orange. Maybe I'll leave that for something for you to do, but you get the idea. So I'm going to undo that and put it back to what it was. So it is 20, and the page you can see it says low and no action required. Right. Maybe the topics is going to be a premium feature and we don't want that to be shown for free. So what we're going to do next is, I think the best way is to do a filter on that loop of results for the checks. And that could be a JSON array, and we could have that JSON array in Flagsmith. Therefore, we can change that quite easily. So let's go back to the Flagsmith dashboard and let's create a new feature flag. You could call this free or premium, whichever way you're looking at it. I'm just going to call it free for now. It's going to be enabled by default. And the value here, we're going to choose JSON, and we're going to create an array. So here we can say the features that will be free. So we could put description, and then we'll put URL. I'll put topics for now and we'll remove it later, but let's just see it all working. I want to add a description of free features, and I'm going to hit create. Let's go back to our code now and start adding Flagsmith. I want to minimize the checks for the moment. So what we want to do first is import Flagsmith, use Flagsmith from Flagsmith React. Thank you, Copilot. And then in our code, what we're going to do at the top of our component is we're going to say const Flagsmith, and we're going to say use Flagsmith function. And then let's get the free features. And the way we can do this is we can say const free, and we can say Flagsmith get value free. But we want to get it as JSON. So I want to pass in an extra property, which is JSON true. Okay, and hit save. If I refresh the page, you're going to see nothing has changed because we're not using that data yet. So all three are still displayed. So what we can do next is add a filter in our checks. So we could say filter, and we're going to receive the check individually. And for each check, we want to say, is it included in our free feature list? And we're going to use the ID to check that. So what we put in Flagsmith needs to match the ID here as well. Otherwise it won't match up. So let me hit save. Oh, I got an error. You can see I made a typo. This happens to all of us. I'm sure you can all understand that. Right, I've changed from included, which doesn't exist, to includes, hit save, and we've got all three. And that's what we're expecting because we had all three in Flagsmith. So let's just check it's all working by going to Flagsmith. I'm going to click on the free feature flag, and I'm going to remove topics. And now, without redeploying, without changing any code, we should see only description URL appear on the site. So now if I hit refresh, it's disappeared, it's gone, it worked. So description URL are free, that's what we're going to put out publicly, and the topics is not. But if we ever change our mind or ever want to do an offer, we don't have to change any environment variables or code and config and redeploy. We can literally just change it here. So even I can remove URL as well, hit update, go back to here, and we can manipulate that. I mean, I think that's pretty awesome. Let me know what you think in the comments below, because I think that is really awesome. I want to put those back in. I want to put them both back in and take topics. And remember, you could do this for a specific user. So yes, at the moment I'm doing it for everyone, but don't forget you can add segment override and say if they're a maintainer or a premium user, have a different set of JSON. So they might have topics included or additional 4 or 5 items that you might want to display. So if I hit refresh, they're all back now. Now we have a good understanding of feature flags. There's even more we can do with Flagsmith. I would encourage you to visit the Flagsmith website, which I have a link in the description below, as they have a super generous free tier on their cloud platform where you can get started in minutes. Or for those of you who prefer to host everything yourself or have certain compliance requirements to meet, you can also use it on-prem as well. You saw that we were enabling, disabling features, but what if we are out and not in front of our computer? We want to schedule our changes. Well, we can. In your environment, under features, you have scheduling. And here you can actually schedule for changes to happen at a certain date and time. Also, as feature flags grow, it could be difficult to remember and keep checking what the values are for each environment. Flagsmith has a solution where we can compare feature flags across environments. So I've selected compare at the top left, and here we can do it by feature values, identities, or environments. I will just do environments for now. And here we can see what has changed. Production is hello world, and development we changed various times, and it's hello open source community. Talking about feature flags growing and our usage, or as our team increases, we'll want to look back at some of the changes. And this can be achieved by going to the audit log section just below compare. And here we can see all the changes that we've made to different environments, and we can filter to the specific environment as well. Platform-to-platform integrations are super popular and useful in our industry. Flagsmith have integrated with many of these popular tools. I'm sure Slack will be popular as it will send messages when flags are created, updated, and removed. So to conclude, I hope you've enjoyed this video on how to set up the open source project Flagsmith with your project. Here are my key takeaways. Think about feature flags before you create the feature. Decouple your releases from your deployments. There is test-driven development, TDD, but maybe there should be FFDD, feature flag-driven development. Maybe it'll become a thing. We'll try and work on that together. Don't forget to give their GitHub repo a star to support and give it a try. Link in description below and let me know what you build. I really look forward to seeing it. Any questions, come and join the Flagsmith Discord. I'll see you there.